Hello and welcome. You are now listening to Hinckley Community Radio, a non-profit podcast radio station.
Let's start tonight with a question for you to ponder over. Did a computer from the 1980s really communicate with a farmer from the 16th century? Tonight's show focuses on a phenomenon known as the Dodleston Messages and dates back to the mid-eighties, when a household in a small English village of Dodleston in Cheshire allegedly received messages on their computer from a farmer who lived back in the 16th century. This strange paranormal event was documented by one of the house occupants at the time, Ken Webster, who also covered this in his book The Vertical Plane, and has appeared in a 1996 episode of a paranormal documentary called Out of This World with the ever-delightful Carol Vorderman. But what exactly are the Dodleston Messages, and how much truth is out there to corroborate them? Greetings, Unexplained peeps. Thank you for tuning in and listening to Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a psychic medium, an eclectic Wicca, and an Arcturian starseed who didn't know that the word gullible had been removed from the English dictionary. Think about it. And the necessary disclaimer. You listen at your own discretion. All opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts remain as true. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, does need some elocution training at times, but hey, I'm an alien, remember? In fact, we all are. So, back to the story. Now, according to Wikipedia, Dodleston is a village and a civil parish in the unitary authority of Cheshire West and Chester in the ceremonial county of Cheshire, England. The village is situated to the southwest of Chester, very close to the England-Wales border. It is one of the 3 old Cheshire parishes which are situated in the Flintshire side of the River Dee. It has a village shop cum post office, a village hall, a village green, a Grade 2 listed church, and a pub called the Red Lion, a very common pub name in the UK. Dodleston's population as the 2001 census was just 715. So, as you can see, a very small village. Okay, let's begin. It all started with the appearance of some six-toed footprints printed in the dust of Ken Webster's 18th century brick cottage called Meadow Cottage. They seemed to walk up the walls between the bathroom and the kitchen. It must be a prank, thought Ken, his girlfriend Debbie, and their lodger Nick. It was 1985, and Ken Webster was slowly but surely renovating the old cottage, which, unknown to them all at the time, had sparked off some unusual activity. Nowadays, we know a lot more about what decorating and building work can do to a property in waking up spirit activity. So, Nick then took a paintbrush and gallons of paint to the footprints and covered them up. For good. Or so he thought. It wasn't until the prints returned the next day that the prank was suddenly much less amusing. Over the next few days, cold gusts of wind, shadows, and the eerie presence of invisible entities haunted the residents of the Cheshire cottage. At one time, there was even a 6-foot-high stack of furniture in the middle of the front room. Actually, if you check out the Hinckley Community Radio Facebook group, you will find a copy of the photograph that was taken at the time, along with several other photos that relate to this case. You can also find them on my Mark the Medium Facebook page and my own personal Facebook account, Mark Hughes. Anyway, the lodger, Nick Points, holder of a master's degree in early modern history from Birkbeck University of London, in an email interview he gave and said, and I quote, "We find strange footprints in the dust on the floor and tins of cat food all neatly stacked up in a pyramid." Unquote. It was in 1984 when Ken Webster, Debbie and Nick all went out to visit a friend for a couple of hours one evening. Upon their return, Webster decided to check the upstairs BBC microcomputer that Nick was using, which for some reason had been left on all night. Webster wanted to have a nosy at the work Nick was doing. To his surprise, upon opening the Edward word processor, he found the following message.
Ken, Deb, Nick, true are the nightmares of a person that fears. Safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn, pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and sow. But the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light. Get out your bricks. Pussycat, pussycat, went to London to seek fame and fortune. Faith must not be lost, for this shall be your redeemer.
A chilling message for sure, and one that none of the three residents could explain at the time. The computer was a BBC Micro that had been borrowed from the school where Ken Webster worked as a teacher. Not long after receiving the message, the computer was returned to the school, and another wasn't borrowed until the February of 1985. It was then that another message was received, again after an evening where the computer was left turned on. This time the message had a completely different style of grammar and tone. The message in the file read as follows.
I write on behalf of many, what strange words thou speak, although I must confess that I have also been ill-schooled. Sometimes methinks alterations are somewhat baleful, for they break many a sleep in mine bed. Thou art goodly man who hath fanciful woman who dwell in mine home. I have no want to affray, for only saith mine half-witted antic has ripped a twain mine bound have I been breathed a night. I have seen many alterations, lastly charge house and thou home. 'Tis a fitting place, with lights which devil maketh, and costly things, that only mine friend Edmund Gray can afford, or the king himself. 'Twas a great crime to have bribed mine house. L.W.
It was at that time that Ken Webster, Debbie and Nick realised that something strange was happening within the house. Who on earth had written these strange words? Who were Edmund Gray and the writer of the letter L.W.? And why did the writer of the message assume someone had stolen his house? But even more importantly, how did these messages get onto the computer? Ken Webster did confide in a few people, but most had dismissed it as a prank. He even thought that maybe someone was breaking into the house when they were out and leaving the strange messages on the computer just to spook them. Remember, folks, this was at a time long before the internet, when stuff like this could be explained away easily without having to search for the wheres and the why-fors. The lodger, an astute student of 16th and 17th century writing, Nick Points, details the unique nature of L.W.'s message. And I quote, "The messages are written in archaic English with old-fashioned spellings and vocabulary and dialect appropriate for the time and region." Unquote. A fellow teacher and friend of Ken Webster's, going by the name of Peter Trinder, had a closer look at the messages and concluded it was Middle English from the 16th century. If you've ever read Chaucer, you'd recognise the style. Peter Trinder posited the theory that whoever it was that they were communicating with they spoke in this very same grammatical manner. Over 18 months during 1985 and 1986, messages continued to keep appearing on the computer, and Ken Webster committed himself to figuring out who or what was behind them. They had kept all the letters on computer files, and so the trio replied in the same manner that the letters were written in. They asked a series of questions, starting with where and when the person, ghost or presence was from, what college he went to, and who was the reigning king of the time. They asked about LW. They asked about Edmund Gray, why and how they contacted the housemates. And lastly, what should they do next? Through these messages, they were eventually able to establish the answers as to who this mysterious acquaintance was. LW turned out to be a person named Lucas Wayman, a man from the mid-1540s, who seemed to have lived on the same plot of land where Webster's house is now standing. The lodger, Nick Points, the student of 16th and 17th century writing, describes an exchange that answered some questions and yet left many more questions in the wake of Lucas's cryptic reply, and I quote, "Lucas is suspicious about Ken and Debbie's motives. He deliberately lays traps for them to see if they are really from the future. In his time, there was no Jesus College in Oxford. It wasn't founded until 1571, so he thinks that anyone from the future would know he has given from his perspective is obviously false information. His real name emerges later as Thomas Harden or Howarden. Someone of this name did exist and was vicar of a church in Gloucestershire in the 1550s." Unquote. The messages continued, and it became clear to them that Thomas Harden could see and hear some of the goings-on in Meadow Cottage. As he would start to comment... I'll take another run at that. As he would start to comment on some of the photos left around the computer by Ken Webster, like his picture of a Jaguar car that Thomas Harden mentioned later in a message that said,
"I have found your picture of the cart, but it is a crude thing, for without the horse it won't go far."
What made the evidence even more interesting was that Peter Trinder, the fellow teacher and friend of Ken Webster, assessed the messages which pinpointed the tone and grammar with 16th century Cheshire. Remember that travel options for many centuries and even as recent as years ago were very restricted. So dialect and language would have differed quite considerably between the different counties within the United Kingdom. Peter Trinder also sent several messages separate from the rest of the group and then deleted them to ensure that neither of the others were the perpetrators of this phenomena. So, now, hold on to your hats, people. Things are about to get even more unexplained after this short break.
Brought to you by courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for haunted rooms guided tours, just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times and over 16s only unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. The Gift and Craft Shop is open daily from Monday to Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. selling